hexagon going. Now, as we begin this, I just wanted to mention that if you have ever done a granny square before, you're going to find that this is very similar. It's just that we're making 6 sides instead of 4 sides. So we're going to begin with a magic circle. So go ahead and pull your yarn tail through, but do not close that knot. And then you're going to go ahead and bring your yarn onto your hook with a slip knot onto your hook. And now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a series of 3 double crochet clusters into this magic circle, and this is what that is going to look like. For our first 3 double crochet cluster, we're going to begin with a chain of 3, and that is going to count as your first double crochet of your first cluster. So to complete your cluster, you're going to do 2 more double crochets into that magic circle. And that is your first double crochet cluster of 3 stitches. Now we're going to make our next cluster, and we're going to separate that by a chain. So chain 1, and go ahead and make 3 more double crochets into that magic circle. 1, 2, 3. Okay, we're going to repeat that again. We're going to do chain 1, 3 more double crochets into that circle. And we're going to do this until we have 6 clusters, which will become our 6 sides of the hexagon. Okay, so that was our 3rd double crochet cluster. So we're going to do 3 more. And that was number 4. That was our 5th 3 double crochet cluster. So now we're going to do 1 more into that magic circle. Okay, so we're going to end with our chain 1. And now we're going to join it by slip stitching it to the very first double crochet, which was this 3 chain that we made. So we're going to slip stitch to the very top of that stitch. And we're going to slip stitch to close that round. And at this point, you can go ahead and close your circle by pulling on that tail. You'll see that it's ruffled. It is not flat. That is completely okay. That ruffle is going to continue throughout the building of your hexagon. You're not doing anything wrong. That's how it's supposed to be. All right, now we're going to make our way across this first cluster that we made. We want to get over to this chain space to begin our first corner, which is going to be the first corner of our round 2. And if you're using the same color, the way that you're going to do that is you're going to make 3 slip stitches to get your way into this. Now, I will say if you're changing colors, you're going to go ahead and fasten off this color now and just rejoin your next color into that chain space. I'm going to be doing several rounds in the same color, and if you're doing the same, this is how you're going to make your way across to that chain space. You're going to make a slip stitch into the top of these next 2 double crochets and then a slip stitch into this space. So we already slip stitched to this first one to join. Into this second double crochet, we're going to slip stitch. Into this 3rd double crochet, we're going to slip stitch. And then into the chain space, we are going to slip stitch. And that's what you're going to do every time you have to join and make your way over to the next chain space to start clustering again, okay? So for this next cluster, we're going to do another 3 double crochet cluster. So to begin that, we're going to chain 3, which will count as your first double crochet. You're going to see that happening a lot. And then right into this chain space, we're going to complete our cluster with 2 more double crochets. So right into that chain space from the row below, we've got our first double crochet cluster. And we're going to make a corner. So we're going to actually putting another cluster into that same chain space. And when we make a corner, which is made of 2 of these clusters, we're going to separate the clusters by 2 chains instead of just 1 like we did in this previous row. So right now we're going to chain 2, and into that same space we're going to do 3 more double crochets. All right, so that is our first corner, okay? So now what we're gonna do into this next chain space is we're gonna do another corner. We're gonna chain 1 before we make our next corner. So going into this next chain space with 3 double crochets. Okay, and again, we're doing a corner, so we're gonna chain 2 and put in another 3 double crochets into that same chain space. All right, so now we've got 2 corners, one here, one here. All right, so chain 1, make another corner into this next chain space. So you've got 3 double crochets in another chain space. Okay, we're gonna be doing this 6 times. So go ahead and make your way all the way around, making 6 of these corners. So each of your clusters for the corner will be separated with 2 chains. And then each of the corners themselves will be separated with just 1 chain, like so. All right, let's go ahead and finish this off, and I'll meet you and we will join this round together. All right, I've just completed my final corner. I'm going to complete this round by chaining 1, and I'm going to slip stitch to that next double crochet, which was the very first one that we made of this round. And let's take a look at what that looks like. So here you're really going to begin to see your hexagon. I'm closing up that center again. It's starting to get loose. You're really going to start to see it ruffling, and you're really going to see these distinguishable sides. So it's really starting to actually look like a hexagon with the 6 distinguishable sides. And we're going to continue to build on that. So I'm going to go over this next row with you because, again, it is a little bit different still. And we're going to get our way up here to the next row, which is going to be our repeat row for the remainder of your hexagon. All right, so we need to slip stitch our way across to this next chain space so that we can continue to grow and begin our next row. So just like we did before, we're going to be doing 3 slip stitches. So 1, 2, and then the third one right into that chain space. Here we're going to make another corner. So this will be our first corner of our 3rd round. So we do that by beginning with chain 3, 2 more double crochets into that same space, which will complete our first cluster. And we are on a corner, so we're going to do another cluster into that same spot. We're going to chain 2 in between those clusters. So another cluster in that same spot. All right, and then a chain 1. And for this side, now we see our next corner isn't until right over here. So what we're going to do in between is we're going to just place a 3 double crochet cluster into that next chain 1 space. All right, chain 1. And now we are going to make another corner into this corner from the previous round. And we do that by 3 double crochet for our first cluster, a chain 2, and 3 more double crochet into that same spot. All right, so we're going to do that same series all the way around. So here we are across to our next side. Okay, so we're going to chain 1. We're going to do a double crochet cluster into this chain 1 space, and then we're going to make our way over here to this next corner. We're going to make that 6 sides all the way around. We're going to do that same combination. So we've got our 1 cluster, chain 1, and here we are again to another corner. All right, so do that all the way around, and I will meet you at the end, and we will join this and see where we're at. I'm going to chain 1, and I'm going to join to that first double crochet I made of this round with a slip stitch. Okay, so let's take a look. So it's very ruffly. And it is absolutely shaped like a hexagon at this point, okay? So what you're gonna do now is it's gonna look very similar to that row that we just did, is you can clearly identify your corners, your 6 corners, and those consist of 2 double crochet clusters each. And then when you make your way along the side, you're placing 1 double crochet cluster into each of the chain spaces, separated by chains. And you're going to simply do that all the way around. And this is going to build your hexagon larger and larger for as many rows as you need it to be, for as big as you need it to be. So we'll do this last row together so I can show you kind of how it builds as you go across each of the sides. And then finally, this next row, the 4th row, is going to be that repeat round that you're going to do again and again. So I'll just reiterate, if you are changing colors, you can fasten off at this point and then just rejoin with a slip stitch, chain 3, and begin your corner right here. Okay, I'm going to continue in this same color, slip stitching my way across with those 3 slip stitches. Now I am in the corner. Okay, so again, let's just do this first side together and you will get the gist of this repeat round. Making our corner, which we're very familiar with how to do by now. 2 clusters. Going into our first side here, we're going to chain and we're going to cluster our way across to the next corner. So we're going to place 3 double crochets into this next chain space. And then a chain 1. 3 double crochets into this next chain space. And then a chain 1. And here we are at our next corner. So let's complete this corner together. Chain 2 in between the clusters on the corners. Okay, so here you've got your first side of your 4th row, and you're going to continue with that method on and on. You'll see that every time you build your row, you're going to be increasing that side by 1 chain space going across each side. So you're going to continue to make it bigger and bigger. And that is how you make and build your crochet hexagon. All right, so now that we've got our hexagons completed, what we are going to do next is I'm going to show you how to fold them into the L shape that will ultimately become the shape of your cardigan. And now I'm going to show you how to add and extend rows onto 2 of the sides in order to make the cardigan wider. So you're going to add rows to the back and to the front, and that is going to make the cardigan wider so that we don't have to continue with the growth of the hexagon, which will ultimately make your sleeves way too wide. All right, so in order to fold your hexagon into the L shape, what you do is simply take one side and grab the corners, and with the right side out and the wrong side on the inside, you're going to bring those corners together and just grab them and sort of do a shake and a flip and straighten it out, and there you have it, into the L shape. And so what we're going to do with both of those is this is now showing us where the front is and where the back is. So let me bring in the second hexagon so you can kind of see how it's going to come together. So with the second one, we'll do that same kind of fold. So I'm just going to take 2 corners, bring them together, pull it up, and just straighten her out there. All right, so you can kind of see how it's going to come together in a cardigan form. So here's the sleeves, here's the front, and then here is the back. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some rows onto these front edges, and we're going to add some rows onto these back edges so that our cardigan can widen without our sleeves continuing to grow and get wider and wider and wider. And that's what I'm going to show you how to do right now. So in order to keep your edges straight, what I do at this point, because this is a really good visual of what edges are going to get extended, is I'm going to mark this edge and I'm going to mark this edge so I know where I'm going to be adding rows onto. Otherwise, when it's out in hexagon form, I just get a little bit more confused as to what side is what. So I'm just going to add 3 stitch markers along here so I know that this is one side. I'm going to add 3 stitch markers along this back side. So when I open it back up into a hexagon to work it, I won't lose track of where I'm at. So we'll do that one as well. Okay, so here's how we're going to add length onto these sides. We are simply going to do rows of our double crochet clusters, and it's going to be a 2-row repeat based on how many rows you are doing to extend, which you can certainly modify it however wide you want it to be. Go ahead and take your color and take your hook. I'm just going to use the yellow. Of course, do whatever color scheme you are using. And on the front, with the right side facing, we are going to join. If you're right-handed, you're going to be joining in this bottom corner here. Gonna slip knot onto your hook. And you are simply going to rejoin your yarn in this very corner space. I'm just going to take that stitch marker out. So you've got a corner here, a 2 chain space corner. And this is where we are going to rejoin our yarn. And go ahead and just rejoin with a slip knot. So just pulling through and through, just a slip stitch there. Sorry, not a slip knot, a slip stitch. Okay, and we're going to begin right away with a 3 double crochet cluster in this corner. And so we're going to start with a chain of 3, which is going to count as our first double crochet of this first cluster that we're going to make. So into that same space, we're going to do 2 more double crochets for our first cluster. Okay, and we're simply going to cluster our way all the way across, just like we did with our hexagon. So in between the 3 double crochet clusters, we will chain 1 and go straight into this next chain space. 3 double crochets into that one and a chain 1, and we're simply going to do that all the way across. So I will meet you at the other end of this row and show you how to turn and begin your next row, because it is a little bit different than this one. And then you'll continue on with that 2-row repeat for as many rows as you need to extend your cardigan. All right, I've made my way across to the end of this first row of extending this side of the cardigan. And I'm going to make my last cluster in this final corner here. I'm going to make a full 3 double crochet cluster in that corner. All right, so that completed our first row of extending that side. So now we're actually going to turn and we are going to work the other direction. So go ahead and turn your cardigan this way. If you're changing colors or you want to change color at this point, you can certainly fasten off. I'm going to keep doing this extension in the same color. So for our second row, we are going to begin with just a double crochet and a chain. And in order to do that, we're going to make 4 chains. So these first 3 stand as your double crochet, and then 1 more chain stands as your chain space for this next row. Okay, so this is 1 double crochet and a chain. Now we're going to go straight into this next chain space with a 3 double crochet cluster. So 3 double crochets all in this same space. And I'll show you what that looks like. So the second row begins with a double crochet, your chain for your next chain space here that you'll work into on the next row, and then your double crochet cluster in this next chain. All right, so chain 1 and go ahead and cluster your way across just like we have been doing. And I will show you how we're going to end this row with a double crochet as well, and how to begin your third row and what to do from there forward. So I will meet you at the other end. All right, I've made it to my final chain space. I'm going to show you how we're going to end this row. So I'm going to go ahead and do my 3 double crochet cluster in this final chain space. So 1, 2, 3. We're going to do our chain 1. And then to end this row, we're going to do a double crochet into this last stitch of this previous row, and that was actually your turning chain, which counted as your double crochet. So you're going to find that once we've got 1 double crochet, another double crochet, and this top of your chain right here, we're going to do a double crochet into that stitch. And that is going to finish off this second row of extending the front and back. Okay, so for your third row, which is going to be the same as what this very first row of this extension was, when you're working in this direction, you're going to begin straight away with a cluster in this first chain space. So you'll do that again by chaining 3, which counts as your first double crochet of that first cluster, and then 2 more double crochets into that chain space. And again, that will sound familiar because that was how we began this row right here. So we're going to do a repeat of this row where we're clustering across, and then the row after that will begin and end with the double crochet. And then you have a row of clusters and on for however many rows you are going to make to extend the width of your cardigan. So you can do it however many you want, or of course you can look at what is recommended in the pattern for your size and do it that way. Okay, so what I'm going to give you a little bit of a look ahead, because what's going to happen next is you complete all 4 sides, your 2 sides on this hexagon and your 2 sides on the other hexagon. What's going to happen after that is we're then going to come back together and we're going to seam the shoulders and the back closed, and then we're going to add an extension onto the bottom of the cardigan at that point to make it longer, and this is the same technique you're going to do for that. So I just wanted to give you a little look ahead. And then we're also going to extend the sleeves, which are similar, but they're worked in not in turning rounds, they're worked in continuous rounds. So I will show you how to do that, or you can follow the instructions in the pattern. So the next time I see you, we will be done with the extending of the sides of the hexagon, and we'll be together to seam the shoulders and the back closed and really get it into the form that it's going to be for your cardigan. So you're going to begin by inserting your needle through the chain space in the corner. Just pull it through. I'm going to leave this to tie in. And we're going to start in our first double crochets here, again through the outer loop only, with a whip stitch. We're going to do that through each double crochet as well as each chain across. We do this across the shoulders and up the back. And when you look at this from the outside, it creates this really fun textured seam. If you prefer to do the mattress stitch or just a regular whip stitch, that's completely fine too. We are now ready to add on the extension to lengthen our cardigan. And the fun part about this is that you can add as many rows as you want. So if you want it to be more of a cropped version, you might leave it as is or just add a couple rows. If you want it to be more of a tunic length, then you can keep on going. You could even make it a duster if you wanted. You can go for as long as you want. So here's how we are going to begin doing that. Now this is the right side facing. I've got it upside down, so this is like our front corner. We've added on these extensions here, and the length is going to be extended just like we did these turning rows when we extended the front and the back center before we seamed it. And so it's going to be done in in these turning rows of clusters. In our extension around the back and the front, we began with a cluster of 3, and then our second row we began with the single double crochet, and then our third back to the cluster, and on for however many rows you needed to extend. Again, the length is going to be done in the same way, except for we're going to start with just our double crochet row, and then our second row will be our cluster row, so it'll just be opposite. All right, so this is how that's going to look. So in whatever color you are doing for the beginning portion of your extension, go ahead and slip knot onto your hook, and we're going to rejoin in, this is the side of a double crochet, and so find that top stitch, and we're going to rejoin into the loops of the double crochet there, and secure that with a slip stitch. And then we are going to chain 4, and that counts as our first double crochet and our chain that will separate in between our next cluster. And then to this gap right here, we're going to make a cluster. So we're going to do 3 double crochets into the end of this row, into this double crochet here. Okay, and then a chain 1, and then we're going to make our next cluster into this space right here. And then a chain 1. Okay, so that's going to get us across the front extension part of the open area of our cardigan. So again, we started with our double crochet and our chain, and now we're going to begin to cluster our way all the way across for this first row. So from here on, it's going to look very similar. You're just doing your double crochet clusters into each chain space, and then you're going to make your way all the way around the bottom of this cardigan all the way to the other side. So you're going to end this row with your double crochet, and then when you turn, once again, it's going to be just like this. When you turn, you are going to do your cluster right into this space and cluster your way all the way across. And then the third row, again, you will start with your double crochet and your chain, alternating on and on and on. So I just kind of wanted to remind you of how that was done, but it's done again in the same way that these extensions were done for the front and the back. And make it as long as you want, have fun with it, do your color changing as you would like. You could do it all in one solid color. You can do any kind of variety of combination of colors for that. So I will meet you at the end of that portion, and we will lengthen our sleeves together. So as soon as you're happy with the length of your cardigan, you're going to come back and extend the sleeves, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So here we are with the sleeve. This is where our seam is. This is right side facing out, because you're going to continue in a continuous round with the right side facing as you work your sleeve. So this is the seam. Otherwise, it's pretty self-explanatory. Just wanted to be able to show you what exactly you're going to do with this little seam area here where you're going to place your clusters. So go ahead and bring in your yarn in whatever color you are using to extend your sleeve, or refer to the pattern if you want to do the same color scheme I'm doing. And what you're going to do at this seam here, you can certainly rejoin anywhere, but I'm going to rejoin, just right before the seam so I can just show you how to handle the seam. So I'm going to rejoin in this chain space right here. I'm going to rejoin, and we're going to just be continuing with the granny clusters, with the 3 double crochet clusters. So just rejoin with a slip stitch. All right, and then we're going to go in with our first cluster. So our first double crochet is just going to be a chain of 3. Again, that counts as your first double crochet of this cluster. So then 2 more double crochets to complete our first cluster. Okay, so you've got your first one there, and then you're going to chain 1. And what you're going to do when you come to the seam is you've got your cluster here, and then you have this corner of the hexagon, and then you've got another cluster here in this corner, and that's where the seam came together. We're actually going to place a cluster in this space here, and then we're skipping over the seam, and we'll place another cluster right here. And then we'll just continue on in all of the chain spaces. So here's what that will look like. So I just did my first cluster and a chain 1. Then I'm going to make my next cluster right in this chain space here, which was a corner of the hexagon. So just go in with 3 double crochets. Okay, and then chain 1. You're going to skip over your seam and place your next cluster in this chain space, which was another corner of your hexagon. And then your chain 1. Okay, so now you've got your seam taken care of, and now you're simply going to double crochet cluster your way all the way around. And I'm not going to do that all with you because it is repetitive at this point, since this stitch is obviously the main stitch in this cardigan. But what you'll do when you come back around is you will simply slip stitch to join, just like you have been doing. And then if you're changing colors, you can fasten off and rejoin your next color in any chain space. Or if you're continuing with another round of the same color, you'll just do that in the same way we have been. You will slip stitch your way across to this next chain space and continue with your clustering around. All right, so that's what you're going to do for the length of your sweater, changing colors as needed. And then I will come back once you've reached the length that you like your sleeve to be, or again, following the recommendations in the pattern for your size, and I will come back and show you how to work the cuff of the sleeve. So once you've finished the length of your sleeve, what we're going to do now is we're going to do 2 rows of single crochet so that we can taper the sleeve in a little bit before we put on the cuff. So we're simply going to do, the first row is going to be single crochet all the way around, and then the next row on top of that is going to be a decrease alternating between single crochet and single crochet decreases. So what you're going to do to begin here is you're going to go down a hook size. So I've been using a size 5.5 hook. I'm going to go down to a size 5mm hook, and I'm going to slip stitch to close my last round of clusters there. What did I do here? All right, so go ahead and just slip stitch to close. And we're going to be doing those single crochets around, but the catch is that you're going to be just doing the single crochets in the top of each of these double crochets. You're going to skip right over the chain spaces. So that'll start to taper it in a little bit, and that's what that will look like. All right, so I just did my slip stitch. And then what I'm going to do is I will chain 1. I'm going to make my first single crochet into that same stitch that I just did the slip stitch. Okay, so that will be my first single crochet of the round, and then 1 single crochet in each of these next double crochets. And now here I am to this chain space. So I'm going to skip over that chain space and go straight into this double crochet right here with a single crochet. All right, so that kind of just tapers it in a little bit. Working my way across both of those other double crochets with single crochets on top. Next chain space, we're going to skip over that chain and we're going to do single crochets into each of these 3 double crochets. Once again, we're to our next chain space, skipping over that, single crochet into the top of the double crochets. All right, so go ahead and do that all the way around, and I will meet you at the end of this round and show you how we're going to do our decrease single crochet round next. Right, I've reached the end of my round of a single crochet. This is that last chain, and then my chain that I did when I began the round. So I'm going to slip stitch to that first single crochet of the round. Okay, so now you can see how that kind of, just by decreasing your hook size and skipping the chains, you can see how it's started to taper in that sleeve a little bit. And we're going to bring that in even further with our next round. Now, I will say here that if you like the width of the sleeve at this point, then go ahead and just skip this next round. I'm going to bring it in a little bit further before I put the cuff on, but go ahead and put it on and decide how you feel about it. And also at this point, if you want your sleeve longer or shorter, you would decide that. I mean, obviously before you do the round of single crochet, you would have decided that. But if you like the width, then go ahead and leave it as is. All right, so for this next round, I am simply going to do a series of decreases around. So into that very first stitch of the round, I'll go ahead and make my first single crochet, and then I'm going to decrease over the next 2 stitches. So single crochet, decrease. All right, and the next one I'm going to place 1 single crochet, and I'm going to decrease over the next 2. And you're going to do this combination all the way around. So 1 single crochet and then 1 single crochet decrease over and over all the way around. All right, so at the end of this round I will meet you and we will start our cuff. All right, so I've just finished my round of decreases and I have tapered in my sleeve like this. Now if you want to taper it even more, you certainly can. You can add more decreases into that round or less decreases, just however you want wherever you want your cuff, the width to be. Go ahead and just modify that round if you're not happy with the width at this point. You can put your hand through, see how it feels, put it on. All right, so now what we're going to do is we are going to continue with our rows, or our rounds of single crochet, except in order to get this texture, I'll show you here on the other cuff, to get this fun texture, we're going to be doing rounds of continuous single crochet through the back loop only. And so it leaves this little front loop exposed and gives those little bars provide this fun texture for our cuff. So we're going to do rounds of that, and this is what that is going to look like. I'll get you going. I do not join those rounds. I just keep on going. On this cuff I made 8. For the pattern, I write that in. Again, you can make it longer, shorter, whatever you want, but I just continue going around and around and around, and I don't join them until the very end when I'm fastening off. So picking up straight away after my slip stitch at the beginning of that round, I do want to make my first back loop only single crochet straight into that same stitch. So I'm going to place my hook through the back loop only of that stitch and complete a single crochet for our first stitch of that next round. Okay, so again, just showing you a little closer, here's our 2 loops. Normally you're making your stitch under both of these loops. We're going to be doing it under just this back loop, around and around for 8 rounds if you're following the pattern for that part. Okay, so we're going to go through the back loop only, and we're going to do this, like I said, for 8 rounds. You don't need to join them. You can just keep going, and just keep your eye on the beginning of that round there, or mark that, because that is where you will end at the end of that cuff. And then when you have finished those rounds and you're happy with the length of your cuff, you're simply going to fasten off and weave in the end. All right, we are on the home stretch. So I have just finished my sleeves, and I am now going to show you how to put on the kind of collar border of the cardigan. You can certainly put this border on at any time. You could do it after you're done with the length of the cardigan before you do your sleeves, but this is how you are going to do that. Okay, so you're going to want to start at the front bottom corner with the right side facing, so whichever one of those is based on your dominant hand. If you are on your if you're right-handed, you're going to be starting at the right bottom front corner of the cardigan. If you're left-handed, that's going to be opposite. You'll be on the left bottom corner of the cardigan. And what we're going to do is it's going to be very similar to what the sleeves looked like. We're going to do several rows of single crochet back loop only. And this is going to be several rows just around and around and around. You're going to go up the front, around the back of the neck, and down to the other front bottom part of the cardigan. Then you're going to continue across the bottom hem, and you're going to end up right back here again, all in one row with the right side facing. Then you'll be joining the round, and you're going to chain, and you're going to go in that same direction, back loop only, single crochet again and again and again. So it's not turning. We're going in continuous rounds all the way around through the back loop only, and this is how you're going to be able to do it without having to cut your yarn and get the entire border of the cardigan finished. All right, so I'm just starting with this same yarn that I ended with for the last couple rows of the length of my cardigan. And what I am going to do, so say this was like my last stitch at that point, or you might be rejoining your yarn wherever you're starting again at the process. Go ahead and make a chain and just turn your cardigan a little bit, and we're going to begin making our way up the front of the cardigan along the edge, along the opening edge. Let me get this arranged here. Okay, so we're going to be going single crochet, making our border, and we're going to be placing at the ends of the double crochet rows, you're going to be placing 2 single crochets around each of the double crochet stitches at the ends of the rows here. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see that. So here we are with our first double crochet right here, and we're simply going to do 2 single crochets around that stitch. Okay, at the end of our next row, we've got another double crochet. You have your cluster, but around this very edge stitch, you're going to do 2 double crochets. All right, and again, here we are at this next double crochet at the end of this row, 2 single crochets around that one. Okay, so we're going to continue in this way all the way up the front of this cardigan. Once you reach the hexagon portion where you extended the front and the back before you seamed the hexagon into the shape of the cardigan, you'll see here in a moment once we reach this end of this extension part. Okay, so continuing this way all the way up until this point, you'll see that you are meeting back up with the actual hexagon part. This is where you extended the front and the back by doing rows of clusters just along those 2 edges of the hexagon, if you remember. And so now we're just going to be working into the actual ends of the stitches here. So once you reach that point, you're going to do, in your first cluster here, you'll be making 3 single crochets across the top of those stitches. And then when you get to a chain space, you'll make 1 single crochet into the chain space. Okay, 3 double crochets across, or excuse me, 3 single crochets across the top of this double crochet cluster. And then you get to a chain space, you're going to do 1 single crochet into that chain space. All right, so you're going to continue this all the way up to where the neck is. Okay, so I'm reaching the neck. So this is the back of the neck where we have seamed the hexagon up the back. Just continue to place 1 single crochet at the end of any double crochet. And then when you come to the end of a row where there's a cluster going the other direction, you're going to place 2 single crochets around those double crochets. All right, so just follow that guide. Continuing to place the single crochets as evenly apart as you can. All right, and then right at the seam, here at the top of the seam, I'm going to place 1 single crochet just right in the middle of where that seam was. All right, continuing on the other side, I've got the end of a cluster here of a double crochet. And then now I'm off to the top of a cluster on this side. All right, so I'm just making my way down the other side now. All right, so continue your way all along, all the way to the opposite bottom front corner, and I'll show you how to transition into creating your border along the bottom hem of the cardigan. All right, so I have reached the bottom corner of the opposite front side of my cardigan. Let me scroll on this so you can see how to do this corner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my 2 single crochet around this double crochet just like I have been all the way down. And then what I need to do before I turn to work the bottom is I need to create a corner so that we have enough fabric so that the ends won't curl up like this or curl under. We want it to lay nice and flat. So for our corner, we're going to do 2 additional single crochet right into that same spot. Okay, so that's going to count kind of as our corner. And then we're going to turn, and here we are with a chain space and then our clusters again, chain space, cluster. So go ahead and place your single crochet into that chain space and then continue straight away along the edge by making your single crochets just like you have been. And if you find that this is curling under, then feel free to add another single crochet in there. Depends on your tension. 2 is enough for me, but if that starts curling up, then just add an extra single crochet on that corner, and that should be enough to bring that straight and allow it to lay flat as you make your corner. And now you're simply going to make your way across to the other side where you started. All right, I have single crocheted my way all the way around the border of this cardigan, and I am back to where I began. So before we jump into the second round of this border, I'm making my final single crochet into this chain space, and then a reminder, just like we did on our other corner, is we need to add some extra single crochets here before we make our turn and begin our second round of the border, so that we have enough coverage here in the corner so that it doesn't start to tighten and pull in. So I'm going to be placing 2 more single crochets so that I have enough coverage there before I join this round back up with the first single crochet, where I'm going to slip stitch to join. Okay, so that is our first round of the border. And now what we're going to do is just simply several rows of back loop only single crochet, just continuing our way around. So starting straight away into that same stitch where we just made our slip stitch, we'll go ahead and chain, and we're going to go through that back loop only of that single crochet for our first stitch of our second round of the border. All right, so here are our 2 loops of our stitch that we normally would go under. We're going to be going under just this back loop only, and that creates that really nice texture that we have on the border of this cardigan. So I am going to simply begin to back loop only single crochet my way around for several rows, and that is going to finish off the border of your cardigan. So let's take a look at it once we get there. But for now, I'm going to leave you to it, and I'm just going to start making my way around and around and around this border. All right, checking in on our second row of the border as we're doing our back loop only single crochet. And as you approach those front 2 corners, I wanted to show you again that we need to continue to build as we make our corner so that the edges don't curl under. And just to demonstrate that, I'm going to show you what this looks like. If I were to be just doing along, and I end up just placing 1 single crochet through the back loop only of each of those stitches as I round the bend, and you look closely, you'll see that it curls in. See how that starts to curl under like that? We don't want that, probably, unless you do, but probably want that to lay nice and flat, and that will only progress to get worse and worse as you build on these rows. So what we need to do instead is that as we approach around this corner, we placed several single crochets in this corner space, and what we need to do is identify kind of the outer 2 or 3, again depending on your tension, but as we work those, we want to do an increase, a single crochet increase in those stitches that are at the very corner. So I'm going to do 3 single crochet increases on these very corner stitches. And that is just going to make sure that my edge does not start curling under. That's laying nice and flat. So every time that you come around and you do those corners, just make sure in 2 or probably even 3, make your increases, your single crochet increases in these edge 3 stitches as you make your corner, however many you need to make sure that lays nice and flat And I just wanted to point that out so that you know why that's being done around the corners like that and why just placing one single crochet isn't going to cut it. All right, so go ahead and continue on.